All right, so depending on whatever letter you chose, you might still be tinkering with a little bit, but basically where we left off with last time is, again, kind of this basic trapezoid and having our letters fall back into space. So to introduce to you two-point perspective, what you want to think about is basically this. What happens if I want this letter that's already going back into space? Again, so we kind of talked about, like, if I were to take, there's my letter F, right? Well, what happens if this letter F is going back into space? Well, what's this side look like, right? If I want this letter F to be going back here as well, we have to figure out a way to do that, right? So, first things first, kind of keep the same horizon line. So just kind of lightly sketch that along. And then somewhere, and I don't care how far back, it doesn't really matter for right now, throw a secondary dot down. So you kind of end up with, I don't know, Baymax. Okay. Now, before, right, we talked about doing basic one-point perspective with just weird, angular, wonky-looking shapes, right? And you were able to easily kind of pull this back into space, thinking about the farthest most edge, and then kind of slice it off. And that would give you kind of that three-dimensional shape, right? So, here's what we're going to do. You now have, and then, for example, my letter F, right? You now have this edge, right? So if you would, now we're going to switch our brains over and say that this is our focal point, that this is our vanishing point, and start pulling these lines this away. So let's do this then, okay? So now, to slice it off, right? Obviously, again, you guys know a lot of this stuff already, but I just kind of want to illustrate it for you, and then we'll kind of throw you to the wolves a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily pick, okay, so this is straight up and down, right? I'm going to go down, and we'll just slice it there, let's say. Again, you can slice it wherever the heck you want to. I know that this one's going back into space. Now, here's the kicker. Normally, I would take this, horizontally, because again, if it's not going back to the dot, then it has to be, horizontal or back to the dot. But with two-point perspective, we're now bringing up a secondary point. So it gets a little more complicated. So here's the deal. Instead of going perfectly straight, this time I'm bringing this one back to this dot. Wowzers. Right? So you end up with, like that, right? Comes back. Then again, straight up and down. Gosh, and I go back again. Oh my lord. Oh. Let's bring it back, forth, back and forth, and back and forth. Woo! It's a lot. It's a lot of info. It's a lot of weird looking stuff. It's going to make a lot more sense here in about a second, I promise. But what you end up with is this two-point perspective letter, right? And the key is, it's two-point perspective because we're looking at the corner of that letter. This angle is going back. This angle is going back. So it's a little more tricksy than one point. You can see why one point comes in handy. If it helps your brain think about it a little bit, really all we're doing is two one-point perspectives, right? So if I had a cube here, I'd pull that back in space. Then I'd pull it back over here in space, and that would be my two-point perspective, going back that way and back that way. Let's do this real quick. We're going to have a little bit of fun. I personally like this part the best. So remember whenever I talked before about whenever I marched that stool around our classroom, right? And whenever the stool was below you, you could see the top of the stool. And whenever the stool was above you, you could see the bottom of the stool, but you can never see the top and the bottom at the same time, unless it's made of glass or something, right? Or if I shake it really quickly. Okay, right? So what we're going to do is this. We're going to draw 3 trace boxos, and we're going to have them kind of sprawled out so that we get one on top one right in the middle, and one below our horizon line, okay? So here's what we're going to do first. Before we do the dot, because again, it's not 1 point now, it's 2 point, right? So we need to think about where that horizon line is. So go ahead and just draw a line, light and sketchy. Okay, and let's do this too. Somewhere on that line, again, you can do it at the very, very ends, or somewhere else. That's fine. Throw 2 dots. Right. So again, now we have like an emo whale or something, or maybe an emo narwhal. Okay. All right. So you've got your line, you got your dots, right? All right. Here we go. So I'm going to walk you through, like I said, step by step to make sure that this makes perfect sense to you, and then we'll play some games. So above your horizon line, go ahead and draw just a singular line, straight up and down. Then we're going to do the same thing, only this time we're going to make a line, a vertical line, right at our horizon line. So it's right at our eyes. And then, surprise, put 2 and 2 together, we're going to do one right below. Cool? Okay, so here we go. All right, let's do this. For right now, let's just stick to the right-hand side. Okay, just again, because I want to walk you guys through every step of the way. Okay, so from the top, we're going to start off at the top here. This top line is going to have 2 lines, each corner here, going back to the dot. So 1, 2. Don't worry about cutting it off. Don't worry about anything else. Just whoosh, little triangle piece. Then you're going to do the same for your middle line and your bottom line. So you'll end up with like a starburst or something. I don't know what you want to call it. Right? Okay. So, surprise. I know you're all shocked. You're like, but wait. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So again, same corners, only this time going back to the other dot. So, if these were like the world's biggest, longest textbooks and they went back forever, you can kind of start to get some cool 3 dimensions. Or like if my narwhal had a beak or something. No, I don't know. So, here we go. So, now what we need to do is put some cuts, okay? And then there's a last little tricky, so don't get ahead of yourself, okay? So, what we're going to do is this. We're going to add on another set of vertical lines. And again, you can go as far back as you want to. I really don't care. I'm going to slice mine here, let's say here, and there. Technically, you could do them all at the same length as well. I'm just mixing it up just because for funsies. After you've done these 3, and like I said, if you want to do them all in the same row, you're welcome to. I'm just kind of playing around a little bit. We're going to do the same thing over on the other side. Again, 1, 2, 3, crunch. So, here's the deal. Now, this is the last little tricksy part, okay? This is the last little tricksy part. Now, I will tell you this. Out of this entire 2-point stuff, if anything gives you any trouble, because let's be fair, this is all basically 1 point, just doubled, right? If anything gives you any trouble, it's going to be this step. So, give me a good attenciones. Here we go. So the key is this. When you're doing this last step, what you're going to want to do is start crisscrossing. A good way to remember is, remember we talked, again, way back when, right? We talked about kind of 1, 2, 3, all parallel. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, all parallel. 1, 2, 3, all parallel. Right? And that makes your cube, right? And this cube is, what? 2-point perspective. Okay? So, here's the deal, right? We've got 1 going this way. 2 going this way. So to get our third, we're going to come from this little point right here. And we're going to take him back in space. Okay? Then I'm going to do the vice versa, right? 1, 2, and then this guy here, I know he has to go this direction back to the dot, so I'm going to do that as well. Yours might overlap with your boxes on top, and that is a-okay. I'll show you why in a second. So go ahead and see if you can try, but I will tell you this. Keep in mind, this middle one, we can't see the top or the bottom of. It's right at our horizon line, so you can basically ignore him and just jump right up to the top guy after you give it a go. So you'll end up with something like this, where I can see the top of this one, and I'll be able to see the bottom of this one. So you got to do the old crisscross. Occasionally, it makes me want to jump. All right, so at this point, hopefully you guys are feeling slightly mystified, but hopefully somewhat okay, maybe, kind of, somewhat okay. All right, so here's the deal, right? We've talked about this stuff before, but I'm just going to kind of reiterate over again. Remember that here's our horizon line, right? Basically, this is kind of our eye line, right? It's where our head is at. This is a horrible face. Oh, okay. So this is where our eyes are. So obviously, again, we talked before, if I, stand upright, then I'm going to start seeing maybe the top of this guy. If I'm down, on the ground taking a nap or something, then I'm going to see the bottom of this guy. So where that horizon line goes affects what part of the boxes I see. So again, we've got one that's below, and because it's below our eye line or our horizon line, I can see the top of it, obviously. You can all see the top of your desks, obviously, because you're above them, right? You can't see the bottom of your desks, you're not below them. But if you were, then you would see the bottom, right? And then if something is absolutely at your eye line, so again, for example here, right? You can't see either side of this right now because it's absolutely at your line. If I tilt it a little bit, then it starts to get a little wonky junky, right? Because it's absolutely at your line, that's how we see it. So we don't see the top or the bottom. Now, I will tell you this, honestly, the likelihood of this happening is relatively low. You're almost always going to see the bottom or the top of something. Almost always. But it's good to know how that works. Okay? So, we got to mix it up a little bit now because, let's be fair, floating blocks are fun, but they're kind of boring. Because look at how the center here is all the same, right? That's how we started. It's all kind of coming at us at the same direction. But you know as well as I do, if I take this kind of cubey, right? If I take him and I want him to turn a little bit, right? Notice how this center line right here, so if I were to color it for you, right? Notice how this center line is the thing that shifts everything. If I turn it a little bit this way, then all the directions move a little bit. Turn a little bit this way, then all the directions move a little bit, right? So the center line is really the thing, that's like the pivot point, if you will, that makes the cube correct. So, if you want to keep using this real quick, we can. If you want to start fresh, you're welcome to. I'm going to do one up on the tippity top here. If I move this center line, right, I'm going to move it, I don't know, over to the left. Why not? So that's going to be my new center line. Okay? See if you can make that into 2-point perspective. It's a little bit tricksy, and I'll do it along with you, but see if you can do it on your own. Go for it. Keep in mind, if it's a vertical line, it is still perfectly straight up and down. No questions asked. And you can cut it off wherever the heck you want to. Mine's going to be narrow. I'll leave my... At this point, you guys overall are looking pretty fair, I would say. Looking pretty fair. Something to keep in mind, and I mentioned this to a couple of you already, something to keep in mind. In 1-point perspective, kind of this is the rule, right? We talked about this before, right? You either go straight up and down, straight side to side, or back to the dot. In 2-point perspective, you have, again, 3 very, very simple options. Perfectly straight up and down, or back to the dot. Those are your only options. So if you have any other lines, whenever you're making cubes in 2-point perspective, if you have any other lines going in any which direction, they're going to be wrong, because they're not one of those 3. And it kind of looks like an owl, which is adorable. Or a chicken. Okay, so I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to you, right? Horizon line, start there, and this is just me drawing for a second. 2 focal points, right? Anywhere I put a line, doesn't matter, I'll close my eyes and do it, okay, ready? Straight line, okay, right? Anywhere I put a line, connect, 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 connect. We're all good with that, right? Perfectly straight. So far, so good. Following the rule, okay? Perfectly straight, perfectly straight. Now this is where it gets tricksy, just like we talked about it would, right? And that's okay. Something to think about, right? When you look at your intersections, and this will help you out in case you're worried, like, oh, it doesn't look right, I'm not quite sure why it doesn't look right, and you'll run into that, I do too, don't worry. Here's what you do. Stop and look at your intersections, okay? If you have, and I'm going to do X-ray vision mode for a second. If you have an intersection that only has 2 lines going to it, right, then it's not enough. Because it's a cube, right? If you think about how a cube works, right, each one, if I go X-ray vision style, each one has 1, 2, 3 to make a corner, right? So right now I've got, let's see, this center one, 1, 2, 3. Center one is perfect. He's good to go. Okay? But then look at these edges. I've got 1, 2. So this guy's not good. 1, 2, 3. He's A-okay. He's A-okay. 1, 2. He's not okay. You see what I'm saying? 1, 2, not okay. 1, 2, not okay. Right? So what I can do then, okay, I know this is not okay. Vertical, check. Going back to this dot, check. What am I missing? Right? This guy, vertical, check. Back to this dot, check. What am I missing? And if I want to do X-ray vision, again, these ones technically aren't finished either, right? I could finish those up too. Does that help a little bit, maybe? All right, do me a favor. I'm going to let you go a little bit off the reins for a second. So, start fresh. Just like before, horizon line first, and you can make it as big or small as you want to. Nice, good, straight line. Dose dots. And if you would, I don't care, let's say 4 is a good number. Going vertical first, right? Anywhere you want to, I don't care. Let's do 2 above, so like that, and we'll do 2 below, like so, or somewhere, wherever the heck you want. 2 above and 2 below. Transform those, please, into 2-point perspective. Honestly, keep walking. That's going to help you way more than anything else. And I know it sounds stupid, but I promise you, if you able to run 3